Are lifted show trucks the most divisive subculture in the car community? It seems like most people either really love them or really hate them. Add in the popularity of social media shaming and shoddy SEMA-built show trucks with Bluetooth drive shafts, and people can get real negative real quick. This weekend, the USA celebrates Memorial Day, so as a reminder, America has the best car culture in the world. Don't agree? Fight me in the comments. I think that's part of the reason the US has such a vibrant car culture is because of our foundation of freedom and individualism. That American dream of being able to work hard, make your money, and do whatever the fuck you want to do with it. Taking a purpose-built utility vehicle and modifying it to the point where it loses utility might not make sense, especially if you're coming from the off-road community. Trust me, this thing isn't going in any mud pits. This is not about utility. This is about flex. Over time, having a large truck became a status symbol. And how do you make a large truck even a bigger status symbol? You lift it. Still not enough status? You make it flashier with a set of wheels that cost more than your neighbor's daily. Bonus points if you use it to tow your $100,000 wake boat. If you've ever been around our channel or in our shop, you know that show trucks aren't exactly our forte. But we're not in this business to sit around and judge people or what they like. We're passionate about helping you guys achieve your automotive goals. And we just love the challenge of working on anything that comes through our doors. While this build might not be for everyone, I bet if you follow along, you're bound to learn something new. Before we dive in, you know the drill. Like, subscribe, drop a comment for the algorithm below, and let's get started. So we finally got the GMC Denali inside, and that was quite a process, just getting the spare on there and really just getting a bunch of guys to push it in carefully. Got it on the lift, and we're about to take it apart, but just wanted to show you some of the parts that are arriving. Now, in true show truck fashion, we've got a lot of the parts that have either been damaged or that we're replacing with new, powder coated in white to match the finish of the vehicle. We've got some body spacers, some other lift components that are going to be going on to try to fit those massive wheels that we showed you last time. Brake lines, there's more stuff arriving all the time, new upper and lower control arms. But I know what you guys want to see, and it's the damage that happened to the truck in the accident. Again, this is an insurance job, but man, there is some carnage, and we're going to be taking it apart. If you don't remember, I mean, look at this rotor. It's in two pieces, coming apart, not even connected to the hub. Scraping, damage. We've got lots of filings that were shaved off from this thing just moving around. Lots of rust everywhere from those filings touching everything. But like I said, all this has to come out, and we've got to get new stuff on here to get this thing back on the road. It took a little while to get the parts and then get the parts powder coated, match up what we're trying to do, how big the wheels are going to be, but most of it's here. Now, getting all this stuff on there might seem like it's a plug and play deal, but oftentimes it's not, especially when it comes to this lifted show truck culture. Very polarizing. Some people love to hate it. Some people love it. But that being said, these guys love their trucks. They love spending money on them. They want them to be right. And sometimes having the right shop that knows how these things come together in an aftermarket situation, getting them to fit, getting all this stuff to line up, isn't just a matter of throwing the stuff on. We're a fab shop. We're well versed in this stuff. So if we run into anything along the way, we're going to be able to take care of it. But we're going to try to get this thing apart. It's probably going to be pretty nasty, but we'll show you guys some of the carnage as we go. So taking apart a vehicle that has essentially been in an accident is usually more challenging than a typical disassembly. This GMC Sierra Denali was already modified before it slid on black ice into a curb. And if you want to see the initial inspection, check out the first video in the series. Now this customer was referred to us for the mechanical repair because the body shops that he looked into did not want to mess with a vehicle that was modified, which makes this even more challenging. The accident shifted components from their original position, so nuts and bolts are harder to access or stuck.
All possible affected components need to come out for inspection regardless if they are being replaced as part of the upgrade, which will also check the frame for damage. All these factors equate to components not disassembling in the typical order, and added in the fact that it's a salt belt vehicle and you can ensure things need a little bit more TLC to come apart. But yet you still need to keep track of all the parts in the vehicle and their locations, even if we think they're being replaced, because sometimes the hardware they supply with the new items is just wrong. And only by looking at the old part can you understand why these aftermarket ones won't work. So you might end up reusing or finding something else entirely to do the job. Yeah, it's a balancing act, but it's our job. So because the customer wants to run bigger tires, the vehicle needs more lift, which will be done by adding a body lift, taller front knuckles, and additional leaf springs. There's lots to take apart here, so heating things up, keeping close track of what's removed, and being cautious helps to ensure that we can reuse items if needed. With the tedious task of removal out of the way and the bones checking out, means it's time to start installation.
So as an aftermarket shop who not only installs these parts but also modifies, we're running into our first bigger issue with this kit, and that being that the hubs aren't exactly for what is on the car. Now, what I mean by that, on this year, 17 GMC Denali, there were apparently 3 different control arm options: stamped steel, aluminum, and apparently cast steel as well. Now, when ordering, it's easy to maybe not know exactly what's going on or the differences when you're putting this stuff into the order form. Checking back and forth with the companies that acted as the middleman to do the order through Rough Country, we did put in the appropriate control arm configuration. We are now learning that the difference between these 2 hubs is that this hub is for a, if I got this right, a cast steel control arm. This one is for the aluminum or the stamped steel. Now, this guy here is that front one, and as you can see, look how messed up that is. And that was only from parking lot driving after the accident. You could see the rust from the metal shavings that hit everything, the time that was sitting in there, just absolute carnage in a small amount of time. Imagine if that thing was moving faster, kept driving afterwards, if this was a high-speed accident, that'd be a big mess. But the issue that we're having is because those ball joints where these things press in, and this is one of the stock ball joints, we're talking about the taper angle. Now, measuring this out, this appears to be a 10 degree, roughly 10 degree, 2 foot taper is what they refer to it as, meaning the distance that it would move in 2 feet, it tapers a certain amount, which the math comes out to about 10 degrees. Apparently on most Chevy pickups, they either use a 7 or a 10 degree, which is going to affect, and here's the issue, where this thing sits down. As you can see, that thing goes right in there all the way through. But if we move it to this guy, look how much space we have there. We can't just throw the bolt on there. We can't just get another ball joint because it won't fit in the control arms that he has. Now you probably say, oh, you can return it. But here gets into the issue. We had this thing powder coated pretty much immediately from the box, picked it up, sent it right out, meaning we kind of own it at this point. The customer owns it. So what do we do in this sort of situation? Well, luckily we have a fab shop, and we've run into these issues before, especially when we're designing aftermarket control arms. We've done a few on some of the off-road projects we've done, such as our X5. So we're fairly familiar with the taper, trying to get a ball joint down to sit. And the best way we're going to go about that is what's known as a taper reamer. Now, what this is this is a matching dimension that's going to allow us to machine the angle down in order to get this guy here to sit further in. Now, a lot of the astute out there might be thinking, well, that's not exactly precise. How are you going to know how much to drill down? What if you go too far? All I can say for that is having experience in doing this is going to make us go very slowly with this. And we're going to measure the distance at which we're drilling and try to attain that on the other side. So it's a slow going process. It's not very fun. It's not something that we can really even bill for accordingly, but this is what a experienced fab shop may run into, may have to end up doing in these sorts of situations. The big problem is that the control arms, the aftermarket control arms, do not come for the cast variant, meaning that we would have to completely switch things over. Again, what if we don't get it 100% right, we're off a little bit? Well, that's what alignments are for. They allow you to adjust for these sort of minute differences, including people, bending stuff up a little bit, readjusting. That's why cars have alignments in the first place. So even if we're off by a little bit, as long as we reach the proper torque values on these ball joints, everything's nice and secure there, the nut's not going to come back off. And as long as we don't go too big, and that's the danger, it's not going to have excessive movement. So we've done this plenty of times before. We've messed up a few of them and had to buy new parts before, so we know what not to do. So it's just going to be a matter of going real slow on this lower one and upper one and trying to match the ball joint taper so that way we can get this thing secured. We don't have to reuse parts, and he'll have the additional clearance that this knuckle offers. You can see the distance here, how much taller this one is than this one, for those bigger tires. So a little more work than we wanted to put in, but that just comes with the territory.
Installation went pretty smoothly considering that uninstall was a little bit painful. However, anytime you're dealing with powder-coated components, you always have to add in extra care not to mark them up. The customers just spent a bunch of money to make this stuff look nice, so we've got to make sure we're taking care and being cautious on reinstallation as well, because this is a lifted show truck and these parts got to look nice.
All right, so part of getting this car lifted also involves some work in the rear. So the additional lift clearance is going to be done two ways here. One of them being the lift blocks here. Now, you'll notice that we've got a new lift block, but it actually appears to be a little shorter than what he had in the car. Now, we know the clearance that the old ones gave. This new kit, though, has an additional leaf spring, and that's what Keller here is working on now. Notice the added one that's in white, powder-coated, to go with the others. He's working on getting that compressed and up in there. Once that's in there, we then have to switch over to getting the lift blocks in, which support the springs, raise the whole thing up from the axle. But we are actually wondering if the shorter ones, even though they came with the kit, will provide enough lift for what the customer's trying to do with the new wheels and tires. So what we actually might end up doing is cleaning these guys up, the old ones, and putting them in there if we're not exactly happy with the amount of lift that we got. So again, knowing these things, knowing that what we're after, what we're looking for, we'll kind of have you make decisions in the last minute in order to achieve the outcome, and the outcome here being fitting those wheels and tires. So we'll kind of have to play around once we get the leaf spring in place and make sure which one of these two is going to provide the proper lift. But I'm guessing it's probably going to be the ones that he had on there. That's the plan right now. We'll size these up and check it, but again, more additional work that we weren't necessarily prepared for. But when it comes to getting the customer the desired outcome, It's just what you had to do sometimes. So we've got most of the suspension components wrapped up and installed, and I must say it looks very much more lifted show truck at this point. Everything's in there nice, and now we're moving on to the more controversial mod, which would be the body lift. Now, I kind of went over why body lifts are controversial in a video where we did a body lift on a Lexus. The body lift's pretty significant, and there's a lot of reasons why people might not want to do a body lift, but when you're doing a vehicle for the purpose that this car is being done for, which is status, the show status, it's kind of a common thing. However, it's not just a matter of sticking on some giant spacers and calling it a day. There's a lot of components that need to be taken account for in order to get this thing to fit upright. Lines, wires, things along those lines, brackets for the bumper, the bed spacing. There's a lot that goes into getting these things right, and we're in the middle of this one, so let me show you what we've got going on. Step back here for a minute, take a look at the truck, and as you can see, it's got a pretty good lean to it right now. And that lean is because we've got one side completed. As you can see here, this guy is the body spacer. That is fiberglass reinforced nylon, and that's gonna hold the chassis away from the body and give us a little bit more clearance for these giant tires that the customer wants to run. Like I said, there's a lot that goes into this, where we're gonna have to space the bumper to get it to fit back upright, the radiator, a lot of the mounting stuff. So it's not just a matter of slipping these things in and calling it a day. We've got a lot of work, but a few of the crazier things that we're getting done. Again, you can see the spacer. The idea here is that we have to time lifting the body off of the chassis in order to slip these guys in here. And being that it's hard to grab onto the body in the exact right locations, we've got to be super careful and pay a lot of attention when we do this. So, you know, we get it back on there correctly, get all the components that are affected back on there, lined up to be more or less factory. It's never going to be factory, but we're going to try to get it close, try to make professional modifications to make this as professional as possible. So we're in the middle of this. We'll kind of show you as we go. One of the funnier things, look how many lift spacers we needed to use on our lift in order to get this body height to lift it off the chassis. Not something that we do very often, and I won't say it's the safest way, but because the other side of the vehicle's on the ground, it affords us the luxury. If it falls off or something happens, we're only going to be 1.5 inches off the ground, so we can take those risks and those gambles. But we've been doing this long enough where we kind of know where to mount it, where to pick up from, which order, how fast to do it, so that way we don't run into those issues. But it still requires someone who's done this a few times. We've done body lifts. I don't want to say we've done one that's significant, but you know, these are lifted show trucks. People love them for what they are, regardless of how you guys feel about them at home. And this is just what goes into getting them done. Even on newer trucks, dealing with corrosion in the Midwest is a big factor. Just because it's a newer truck doesn't mean that we don't still run into those same issues. Bolts locking up, things not coming apart quite right. This isn't bad. Obviously, we didn't have a huge problem with this, but these bolts were designed because it's heavy duty to have just more metal instead of being anti-corrosive. A lot of these bolts in the new kit have a material on them that's a little bit better than the factory, a coating on the outside. So hopefully that's less of an issue, but it's still something you run into if you ever have to undo this. But being that we're in the Midwest, rust is just a common part of life, and this truck is actually pretty clean, but it's still a factor, and it still can make removal and getting this stuff off and on pretty difficult. So the car's on the ground, we've got the lift kit installed, and here it sits. What do you guys think? Yeah, I'm messing with you guys. So these are obviously OEM size wheels. Why do we have them on there? Is it just to highlight how much difference that this lift kit makes versus the OEM car? Or is it that the alignment place that we need to get the alignment done at can't fit the size wheels for their alignment machine that we're going to be putting on this thing? So we have to actually drive this thing over to our alignment shop that we work with, just like this. I bet you can guess which one it is. But that being said, this is pretty nuts how much lift this actually gives the vehicle and how funny it looks with these wheels on here. But this is going to get us over to the alignment shop so that way we can get the car set up, the alignment correct, and then we can get those wheels on here and actually see how it ends up looking. All right, so what do you guys think? Honestly, it's a lot more lift than I even thought it was going to be. And sometimes you don't know the sum of the parts until you get them all on there. As you can see, these 38-inch wheels and tires, which I thought were going to be monstrous, kind of look a little small in this thing. But this is the look, this is what people go after. So the kit's all installed, we've got to make sure it's aligned, and once we have it aligned, we're going to kind of go over a few more finishing touches, probably clean up the frame a little bit for him, put a coating on there, and call it a day. But other than that, this thing is extreme. And that's kind of what I like about the show truck culture. They do things just for doing it. Regardless whether you love or hate the style, we respect the effort and work that goes into putting one of these show trucks together. As with many projects involving the aftermarket, it never ends up being as easy as tossing on a few parts and calling it a day, especially here in the Rust Belt. Luckily, we're equipped to handle obstacles and deliver a finished product that our customers thrill to have. And we pride ourselves on the fact that we were able to help this customer out when other shops weren't willing to take on the job. Hopefully this video lifted your knowledge, provided some entertainment, and don't forget to take a moment this weekend to be thankful for this great country of ours that allows us to do something like this, and those who sacrificed for your freedom to do so. Happy Memorial Day. We'll see you next week.